Hello and welcome to the Hospitality Solutions podcast from Hospitality Staffing Solutions, a KBS company. I'm James Krause. Join me as we explore the trends and strategies hospitality leaders like you are using to grow and thrive in this ever-changing industry. Hi, and welcome to the Hospitality Solutions podcast. I'm James Krause, and joining me today is Ed Burke, who is the Vice President of Rooms and Engineering at Aimbridge Hospitality. Ed, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. How are you today?
Good. Ed, Aimbridge Hospitality, it's a multinational hotel management company, more than 1,100 properties across the United States. Is it the largest in the country?
Actually, I believe it's the largest in the world. We have about 1,500 hotels worldwide, and that is constantly growing.
Great. So, Ed, can you just tell us a little bit about your role at Aimbridge?
Absolutely. So, as Vice President of Rooms and Engineering, the true focus of my role is on rooms operations. There was a time when our company was smaller that I did a lot of work building programs for the engineering departments, the maintenance departments. But over the last 2-3 years, we saw the need of bringing somebody in for the engineering role. Engineering's taken such a front concern of owners and asset managers. So the gentleman who worked for me, Jason Kilgo, was promoted to Vice President of Engineering. So he has taken on much of the day-to-day engineering pieces. However, my role is still working with engineering to help them with the bigger programs. But in rooms operations, I'm responsible for the best way to explain is everything that you don't eat and drink in a hotel falls under rooms. Front office, bell stand, valet, PBX, housekeeping, laundry, and sometimes a bit in security.
Okay. All right. And, I think in that role that puts you in a really unique position to look at many of the challenges that exist in the hospitality industry. And we've worked together through HSS for a long time. And throughout the pandemic, those challenges have kind of evolved. Where we are right now in terms of the fall of 2021, what challenges are you seeing today in the hospitality industry?
Well, labor remains the number one concern that we have, but even those concerns have evolved. What began with simply room attendants in hotels in the spring when properties started to gain levels of occupancy has morphed itself into the other areas of the hotel. Food and beverage is now becoming alive in our hotels, in the banquets, in the restaurants, in the kitchens. So those areas have become an area of concern with staffing. Front desk has become an area of concern with staffing because a lot of the individuals who at one time had only known working at hotels, had worked at hotels for years and years, were forced to go elsewhere, were forced to look at other industries, and some of them we lost. So, that continues to be a concern. And then there's also leadership. Leadership, while I think Aimbridge has an outstanding reputation and people want, we still get more resumes than what we need. I think finding the right talent for the right properties is key for us. So right now, my role is very much intertwined with talent and manpower development. We have an outstanding training department that we work pretty closely with, and we're constantly brainstorming ways to bring in more talent and to develop them.
Mm-hmm. And with that partnership with HSS, we've worked with Aimbridge for years, but over the last year and a half throughout the pandemic, we really saw that relationship change. Can you speak a little bit about how you changed your relationship with vendors like HSS?
Absolutely. So, if you were to go back into even the beginning of COVID into mid 2020, we started to see real quickly that there was going to be a concern when occupancy started to go upwards, and we started to see some challenges with staffing, right? Because everybody had been furloughed, everybody had been laid off, or a good majority of them. So when it came time to call them all back, we understood real quickly, looking at our forecasting, and we have just an outstanding revenue management department. They saw that the spikes were coming, and they were coming quickly. So how do you bring all of those people back? Because at the same time, unemployment was very much alive and actually giving additional money. So there was no incentive for people to come back to work. So right at that time, I would say probably last September, last October, Carla and I joined up, and we had numerous conversations about, okay, HSS is our top temporary labor company. How do we take this relationship and make it stronger? And how do we work through some of the issues that all temporary labor agencies were having at the same time? So how do we partner better? And I can tell you that I would say probably the business is tenfold what it was a year ago today. And that's largely due to not only the way HSS does their business, but also the problem solving pieces, right? Because you need, when you have that kind of level of business and you're going into areas that this industry has never seen before, how do we make that work? Your HSS is having the same challenges we're having finding great people. So how between the two of us do we make it work? So through many hours of phone calls, many conference calls, many calls of desperation on both sides, I believe that we've built a strong program. But what's most important about that program isn't necessarily that it's 100% perfect all the time, but it's that when something goes wrong or something isn't right, that we're able to jump into it and fix it. Areas of the country that HSS didn't really touch before, they've been willing to work with me and say, because sometimes I'll just go directly to Carla and I'll say, Carla, I have to skip all those other levels. And I apologize for that, but I have an owner here, then we're having a very tough time, and can you see what you can do? And never once has she turned to me and said, no, I can't do that. And that to me is the value of the partnership. And that's what's changed over the year.
Well, and I wonder if we could talk a little bit about how you approach temp staffing. The very name of it kind of signals that this is an emergency measure that somebody calls off and you call up your agency. The reality is that it's much more strategic than that. Can you talk a little bit about that? What kind of strategic planning goes into that relationship?
Absolutely. Well, it's very interesting doing business with a company and telling them that your main goal is to not need them anymore, right? So, and that's the way it is with any kind of labor company that you're working with. But I think, from our perspective and from my perspective was that we couldn't just look at your traditional temporary labor type of program. It had, while you could have that, you also had to look at a new way of doing things, different ways of doing things. So without mentioning the company's names, I'm working with a variety of companies who offer full relocation of a team to bring it into an area of the country that's desperate for labor. I work with I've built a couple of programs internally that address labor in a unique kind of way, dividing the role of the room attendant and how do we make that work. I've also, any agency that comes to our company that calls me or that we hear about or see, we will call, we will meet with them in person, we will vet them, and we will bring them on, trying to highlight certain parts of the country. Now, naturally, I don't go, if it's a mom and pop staffing agency, I don't typically get involved in those because I need something much more accessible to the entire country. However, before where I used to say you have to be national, now if you're in 15 to 20 states, I'll take a look at that and I'll compare that to the needs assessment that we have, that I work with the VPs of operations to see, okay, well, Cincinnati, Salt Lake City, Reno, and Seattle seem to be hot points. Well, this company works with 3 of those 4. I would bring them in and I would speak to them. Where in the past, you typically wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? We're too big of a company to do that. But now the need is so severe that we do. And that's what's so strong about HSS is that you're in most markets.
I thought, I wonder, as you're talking through that national reach, does that also extend to things like safety and compliance? I mean, have those become more important over the years in terms of working with a vendor and even
Absolutely.
Just in general?
Absolutely. It's very interesting because, people and even some companies out there just believe that, they call me, we meet, we have a cup of coffee, we chit chat for a while, and then they're bringing their teams into our hotels. It doesn't work that way. First, once they've spoken to me and I've received their references, I will usually put them in front of my my EVP, Ely Corey, so he can meet with them. Also, he may have some new or unique questions for them. And likewise, I'll also bring somebody from the HR. Typically, it's somebody from the training and development piece to get their impressions of what kind of business do they run. We'll look at references. But then if all that is clear, they still need to be approved through our legal department, through our risk department, and through our HR department to make sure that they, have the same standards, that they're a company of integrity. There's a lot of pop-up. Anytime you have a crisis in this country, no matter what business you're in, there's a lot of pop-up companies that come in and say, I have the solution for you, and they can actually cost your company. And we owe it to our ownership to only bring in those companies who represent us well, and we'll not put them in any type of risk.
Right. Yeah, I always refer to that as I've got a guy down the street, who can offer you the service. And
absolutely, if it sounds too good to be true, it typically is. Just remember that.
Right. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about the role of management companies and their role in the industry and how that's changed and evolved, both related to COVID and not.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's funny. I was in Kansas City last week. We at a Marriott hotel, and I was speaking to them about when I joined this industry back in 1983, how franchises were looked upon, how management companies were looked upon, and in those days we were kind of frowned upon. We were like the outsiders. We were kind of looked down upon. And now over the years, companies like Aimbridge have built such a reputation. We manage somewhere around 600 Marriott hotels throughout the world, and so now they look at us as business partners, right? At Aimbridge, we meet with them. I was just in a meeting with them last month. We meet with them quarterly. That they just like we go to them to help us with issues and programs. They do the same with us. They'll come to us and ask us our advice. They'll ask us how we see a certain standard that's coming up. How do we see that working in our hotels? During COVID in particular, we worked with many of the brands. They were curious as to how we approached COVID and what types of programs that we put together, what was working and what wasn't. So now I see us more as business partners. Of course, we will always, and that's one thing I'll say about Aimbridge, and I hear it at least once a week from somebody in our department and in our company, is that we manage the brands. We manage. So their processes are important to us, and we follow them, because it's very easy to say, oh, we have a better way of doing that. Let's do it our way. And we just find with our size and our commitment to our owners and to our brands that we're not willing to do that. So we will always attempt first and foremost to follow the brand standards and to make sure that works. That hasn't changed, but the partnership and the constantly working together to make it best for us all is much improved over the last 30 years.
And, if it's possible to look beyond COVID, it's such a big topic in this industry.
Please, let's talk about that, please.
I wonder, what kind of trends and challenges are you seeing ahead in the hotel business? Like I said, beyond COVID.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that a couple of things. One is that I think the labor situation isn't going away quickly, right? I if at all, because what's important to remember is that we had labor challenges prior to COVID. COVID didn't bring up on all of the labor challenges. Of course, it multiplied it quite a bit, but it certainly wasn't foreign to any of us. So I think labor will remain an issue for us all as we go into 2022 and 23 and 24. But even that will look different, right? How do we perform the tasks that we do every day? What pieces of our business are important to the guest? What parts of our day can we do more effectively and efficiently so that we can possibly work with fewer people? And not necessarily because you want to. Sometimes it's because you have to. So we're constantly looking at that. I don't think that will change. But I think that the retention of associates, I think there'll be a magnifying glass on that, is when we bring them in, and that's the goal, is to replace temporary labor with our own teams. How do we bring them in and make them stay with us for a long period of time. I mean, every industry that you talk to nowadays talks about the job hoppers, people who will work in a job for a year, then go to the next place and the next place. And that's very, very relevant in the hotel industry, right? People will be a front desk manager at one hotel, and then the hotel down the street will offer them $3,000 more. They jump down there and on and on. So where before that used to be looked at as a negative when you looked at somebody's resume, it's very common now. So I think I know that when we're talking, we talk about retention, not only bringing people in, but then keeping them so that they want to be a part of our great culture. So I think that will become very paramount. And then the services to guests, right? The services to guests changed through COVID. When do we bring them back? What is the most important part of the guest experience for the guest? In particular, your honored guests, your frequent guests are the most, the individuals that you want to pay very close attention to, because those are the individuals that fill your hotels on the weekdays as business starts to come back. What's important to them? What makes them happy? What are they willing to pay for? What are they willing to accept? So we have to stay very, very close to our customers. The piece of the owner and the brand, I don't think will ever change. At least at Aimbridge Hospitality, it's our main focus. We want to make sure that we take care of those two business partners, because that is the piece that will help us to continue to grow. And then, our guest satisfaction is key. We are the newest trend now, because during COVID, a lot of the guest satisfaction scoring was put on hold. But now that it's back and the standards are back as to where you need to be in certain levels, is back. So many of the meetings that I'm involved in now talk about how do we make sure that we are giving the best service possible that we have in our hotels. Not regardless of staffing, regardless of how short-staffed we are, we still need to make that happen, because we are still charging the guest. So that will continue. Last, and I know I'm giving you a whole bunch here, but I think technology will continue to play a huge role for us. I think that we have an outstanding IT department in our company that are constantly looking at ways that we can work more efficiently, that the data that we provide is much more accurate and much more beneficial to everybody involved in the organization. You have to be wary of just a bunch of programs that do nothing but spit out reports, but what do those reports mean and how do we bring them to life? I think that will become a focus for Aimbridge, and I think the industry as a whole.
And how long have you worked in hospitality?
I joined prior to Aimbridge. Aimbridge had acquired Interstate Hotels and Resorts, so I joined them in 1982. 1983. Just as an hourly associate, I was a college student in the laundry room at a hotel down the street. I tell people all the time, for $2.85 an hour. And then I gave up my dreams of being a teacher, and I just love the industry, and I stayed with it, and I'm glad I did. So it's been a great ride. It's been an outstanding career for myself.
Well, I think that was going to be my follow-up question with that amount of experience. And you talked a little bit about the job hopping, but people tend to stay within the industry. Mm-hmm. What do you love about the industry? What do you love about hospitality?
Well, even through all that, I mean, when you think about it, we had the 9/11 years, right? After 9/11, we had that whole year of it was just crisis, right? It didn't last quite as long as COVID has. But then you had the 2008 fall, and you had, every decade it seems that has been marked with some sort of a situation that just caused a burden on the hospitality industry. But through that all, and the one thing that's remained solid, at least with our company, during all that time, is that they've never lost vision of the culture of working with each other and working for our guests and our owners. It's been that part of it to me is outstanding because it hasn't changed. The pieces that make all those things happen has changed, but the general goals of the business of not just worrying about revenues and profit, but also worrying about those those people that work beside you, the people that you're servicing, and even in the communities now. Aimbridge is very much involved in their communities and how do we improve the place where our hotels lie. that's probably what I like most. The second thing I would say is the training and development, getting notes from people who I worked with 33 years ago saying, Ed, I haven't heard from you in ages. How are you? I hope all is well, or maybe something I was able to do for them, or, and they appreciate that. I mean, in that many years, you work with quite a few people, and now they're scattered amongst the country in all different types of businesses, but usually most people have stayed in the hospitality business. When we were meeting with Marriott a couple of weeks ago, and there was an individual that I worked with in the early 80s or the mid 80s, and she's a VIP with she's a VP with Marriott. So it was interesting. We were like, oh my God, after all these years, look at what's come up.
Right. Yeah. No, it's an amazing industry, and I always like to hear what people love about it, because it's been a tough year and a half, really. And but it looks like we're coming through it, and some of the things that we love about it are coming back. So
absolutely.
Ed, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. And thanks for watching and listening. This has been the Hospitality Solutions podcast from HSS.